Patrick. Hello.
Tyler, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Private citizen, Tyler.
Private citizen, great to see you. We've been on the stage a couple times
We have.
together. It's always been fun. I think the last time we were on stage together was in some conference in New York, and it was right before your birthday, and you committed to the public that we would have clarity signed into law on your birthday. That was April, right? Your birthday's end of April?
I didn't specify my 37th birthday, maybe next year the 38th.
I see.
Yeah.
So a little bit of a backtrack, maybe. Why don't you give us a lay of the land? Where are we with clarity? You and I left the government 2 weeks ago. There's sort of three macro issues. Why don't you talk about those issues and tell us where we're at?
Sure. So we have been pushing, like you're talking about, for a year now. You and I personally have been negotiating this. We've been on the Hill quite a bit. I always make the joke, I feel like I probably have a tumor growing at this point, the number of magnetometers that we've gone through in between buildings, between the Hill and over by the White House. But we've been pushing to get the bills out of the Ag Committee, out of the Banking Committee. We successfully did that in the spring. And then now it's the job is to combine the bills, which has been done. But in doing that, there are things that on the Ag side, on the banking side, are still not fully resolved. So we've got the ethics piece, we've got Ag, the title in general, some specific things in there, but kind of one bucket with Ag. And then we've got the BRCA with the law enforcement groups that have been engaged on that one. And then the zombie issue that seems to never die, rewards and yield, is still kind of simmering in the background. But those are the issues. The good news is with all the work that's been done, we're down to the point now where it's pretty clear where the lines are drawn. And it's kind of binary. We're either going to make this choice or that choice. But we're out of the stage where it's kind of ideating and where exactly is the landing spot. We're down to kind of more of a A/B type of environment. So that's when you're at the point where a grand bargain can be had. We wanted to get a procedural vote before the August recess. We ultimately didn't, but we got a decent consolation prize, which is we got a scheduled vote for September 15th when the Senate comes back in session. So everything will now gear up towards that.
Do you feel like the momentum and the attention to the three issues and the bill is building to a nice crescendo in September 15th?
I do. I think it was healthy to take a little bit of a break because we've been at this for so long. Staffers in different offices have been at each other's throats a little bit. So it actually is, I think, a healthy thing to step back, take a breather, go spend some time with your family, come out to Jackson, Wyoming, get a little bit of fresh air, and then re-engage. But I think with a date certain now for the vote, everything, you kind of solve backwards from there. So we'll kind of build up to it and cut the deals that we need to cut in order to get a solid vote on the 15th.
On the BRCA, just because this gets a lot of attention on crypto Twitter, and it's obviously very important to the industry in terms of builders and developers and sort of legal certainty. Give us a little bit behind the scenes of what the BRCA law enforcement negotiations were like and where it stands.
Things are trending in a very good direction. So, this issue kind of, I wouldn't say came out of nowhere, but certainly took us somewhat by surprise. The kind of vigor and intensity with which some of the law enforcement groups push back. And in the early days, I remember having conversations with you. It's like, okay, how many groups are out there? It's not necessarily an area that we are super familiar with, the DC lobbying scene with law enforcement groups, but there are really kind of 11 groups that have been engaged on that have written letters of opposition or concern. We spent a lot of time, you and I, your building, the subject matter experts there, subject matter experts from the Department of Justice, my boss David Sachs engaged, House Majority Whip Emmer engaged. We had Acting Attorney General Blanche, now Attorney General Blanche, spend an hour with the folks on the phone and walk through why we support this policy, why we believe it is critical, why it's a kind of a load-bearing pillar of the crypto agenda that the president wants to implement. And we successfully got now, I think, 5 of the 11 groups are either outright supportive or have walked back their public opposition. And we are talking with another tranche of those groups that are going to move in a similar direction soon. So of all the issues, I would say that one, is definitely the clearest path to resolving very soon.
I always felt personally frustrated that some of the policy issues that we were fighting on had nothing to do with digital assets or crypto policy. They were sort of a sideshow. How do you keep a cheery demeanor on these issues when they're not really germane to the actual substance of the U.S. having a rational approach to digital asset policy.
No, it's so true. I mean, the RCA is one example of that. The other one, obviously, ethics. Is you can tangentially say like it's related to crypto, but like the U.S. dominating and maintaining its leadership role in financial markets, capital markets, the world over is not dependent upon whether or not there's an ethics provision in this bill. That's something that is a purely political issue. I get it. I understand where Democrats are on that. So we've engaged. That's why the president signed off on an unprecedented ethics provision. The first ever to basically restrict the conduct of the president of the United States. President Carter signed the Ethics in Government Act in the wake of the Nixon Watergate scandal, but that just provided disclosure for the president. The kind of closest thing, Obama signed the Stock Act, which limited all federal officials, including the president, from basically participating in a privileged way in an IPO, but that was already kind of prohibited. So it really is an unprecedented ethics provision that the president agreed to, and it demonstrates the priority with which he puts on this bill and reshoring and dominating this industry.
Do you feel a little bit like the conversation of the narrative has been lost in Washington? In other words, do you think that people are paying attention to these three issues in isolation and missing the macro picture of how the EU and how the Middle East and how Southeast Asia is looking at the United States and the policy framework and seeing how it advances? Do you feel that, or is that palpable?
100%. We are so lost in the weeds. We're trying to encourage folks to zoom back out and remember why we're doing this. This is about establishing a clear regulatory framework to allow the United States to maintain its leadership position into the future of finance. You think about the United States, what kind of underpins our success as a country? It's obviously our military might. It's our judicial system that we have, but it's also our leadership in financial markets and the U.S. dollar's place in global finance. So we have to establish the regulatory framework now that we're entering this new era of how value is stored, transferred, settled on the internet. This really is kind of a new chapter that we're entering into. And if the U.S. loses its leadership position, someone's going to write the rules. There will be a set of norms and a set of rules that get established, and someone's going to have to write them. And if we kind of yield or cede the opportunity to lead in this space, I think it's a massive failure of American leadership. And to your point about other countries, other jurisdictions, we hear from them all the time. And they're like, yeah, we're just waiting for the United States to get clarity passed, and then we're going to basically adopt a similar type of regime so that there's reciprocity and that we're in alignment with the United States. Everybody's waiting on us.
Okay. So bullish on clarity passing.
I'm bullish on it.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's enter the world in which it doesn't happen.
Okay.
What do you think the regulators need to do? And in the report that the White House led last year, there was obviously a significant contemplation of here's what we want Congress to do, and here's the objective, and then also here's the regulatory side of things to advance in the absence of clarity.
Yeah, I mean, I think there have been some headlines about this with the SEC, with Reg Crypto, with the innovation exemption. The CFTC has a number of policy items teed up in the event that clarity does not succeed. So there is a robust set of rulemakings that will go out, but we're given every opportunity for the Senate and for Congress to pass the bill before we ultimately break glass and move in that direction. Both Chairman Atkins, Chairman Seelig have been terrific on this. It's tough. They're thoroughbreds. They want to be let loose. They want to do their jobs, and we want them to be able to. They've given us a lot of space to allow this process to play out. But we can't wait forever, as we know. And so we've got the window in September here, and if ultimately it doesn't succeed, then they're gonna let loose.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about clarity with legislation, clarity if it doesn't happen, the regulators, and how it affects Genius. Obviously, the bank regulators and Treasury Department have been actively focused on Genius Act, getting it implemented. Comes effective next year, early next year. Where are we at in that process? And how do you think about the overall ecosystem if clarity doesn't get enacted?
Mm-hmm. So I think on Genius, I don't know the exact number, but we've got rulemakings that are in flight right now at Treasury, OCC, FDIC. Now everybody is following through on the directed rulemakings from Genius. And it's easy sometimes from the outside to think that, you got a year to write these rules. Like, that's plenty of time. It's actually a breakneck pace in Washington to move at that speed. And I think we did trip one of the deadlines, but we're trying to adhere.
Government shut down for 44 days.
Okay, all right. Not being critical of your former employer. But anyway, there's all sorts of activity happening across government, and it is somewhat lost in the clarity discussion right now. But throughout all of the federal regulators in the financial space and capital markets, all of them are moving to implement that, and we're already seeing the effects of that. And once the rules are firmly put in place, I think it's only going to accelerate institutional movement in this space.
Yeah. And the White House Crypto Council. Obviously, you've been in this seat for around a year or so, maybe a little over it. The nucleus that exists, I always found it quite helpful because there was a centralized clearing function in the White House for the policy substance. How has that team maintained? What do you see it looking like in the future? What would you tell folks in the audience of how to best engage with the government, including the White House Crypto Task Force?
Yeah, I would say, we have all these different agencies, different missions, different responsibilities. It's always helpful when there's some kind of centralizing entity in the White House to not necessarily, direct others, but just to information share, coordinate, sequence things appropriately. So we're a great kind of first alert, a first stop if you want to connect and figure out where exactly you need to go from there. But we talk all the time. We have regular meetings, as you know. SEC, CFTC, Commerce, OCC, everybody's involved. Everybody's talking about what's coming down the pike so that there's no surprises and we can kind of surface any disagreements or, areas of confusion in advance. So I think when you look at all the different policy areas in this administration, really, crypto is a bright spot. We've done incredible work. The executive orders, the report, Genius, the follow-on rulemakings, the rolling back of previous, harmful rulemakings or actions from the previous administration. I would really put crypto as kind of an isolated policy area up against almost any other area in the administration in terms of achievements.
Yeah. Appreciate that. Big week. We have a little bit of time left, so let me try to squeeze 2 more questions in.
Okay.
Big week in Washington. A lot of stuff happening. Can you tell us what's going on?
So the president will be meeting with a group of CEOs from traditional finance, from crypto. I think we might have some of the prediction markets CEOs there as well tomorrow, and I think just a high-level discussion. And then on Thursday, the CFTC will be launching its initial Innovation Advisory Council meeting and bringing in a larger group of those CEOs from industry to hear from them on ways that specifically the CFTC can start moving out on some of the priority policy areas to make sure that we do reshore these markets and we allow the United States to lead on these products, which are really at the frontier of financial innovation.
Great. So last thing, what message would you leave with the audience, the people on live stream, the ecosystem of how to best engage between now and September 15th when we're expecting the first vote in the Senate?
Yeah. I would say enjoy, like I am, a little bit of time outside of DC, but come really last week of August, first week of September, it's going to jump into overdrive, and people are going to be resurfacing the issues. We'll be talking. We'll be sitting down with Democrats and really trying to hash out the areas where there are disagreement and get a solid vote on the 15th. But I am truly optimistic and bullish about it. So get ready to get back to DC and engage here pretty soon.
Excellent. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your service.
All right. Thank
Pleasure.
you as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tyler.
Yep.